Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
You ready to talk about Xenogears?
I am not ready yet. Let's talk about something else. Just kidding. Let's do it.
It's always an intimidating task. There's a lot to talk about. We stopped last time on the Reaper ship, the Wels ship, with Billy, right before going down and fighting the boss.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that you had stopped a little before that, but there's not much.
There's not much going
between.
through that whole thing until.
So basically, go down and fight the boss.
Which is basically another Red Room thing again.
Another Wels that looks exactly like it.
Except it has a gray cloak shawl instead of a red one.
A red one.
Or gray hair instead of red hair. I don't know if that's hair or a shawl.
And for the most part, like the boss is fairly similar, like the strategy is similar. The only difference is that he uses his two instant death attacks right off the bat, like the first 2 rounds. And then he'll never do it again. The rest of the battle.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be Red Room again, and this is gonna be so freaking hard. But this is the first time we've seen. It was very well done by the game creators to put this enemy right after the orphanage, after we discovered that the last Red Room we killed was somebody's dad,
like a reinforcing
was like a real person
kind of thing.
And so then we go out and here's the more Wels and Reapers, and we go out and boom, we see another of the exact same kind of person, right?
Yeah,
and we kind of have an idea of what's going on this time.
Yep.
That was well done.
Now, right after this battle, Bloody, which is the name of this one, Red Room was the name of the first one.
Yeah.
This one's name is Bloody. Bloody says, I'm counting on you, and dies.
I took notes on this. I took notes on this in the Japanese. It's a little different. It's close, but it's a little different.
It's different. It's even if it's just a little different, it makes unbelievably way more sense. Not translated this way, but the way it should be.
Yes.
Because the next thought is from Billy as he's on like the computer terminal, and he thinks, "It's my buddy. I'll call him over here."
This is
terrible.
This is so bad. He must have just maybe he had a cold this day when he was translating these lines. Maybe he just wasn't feeling good. He had a headache. So the Japanese is just great. So, it's okay. So it says mo aniki ato wa tanonda. So tanonda means to count on somebody. So that's why it says, "Oh, I'm counting on you," right? Tanomu, ju. But it says aniki, which was not translated, I don't think. Aniki means older brother.
Yes.
But here's where Honeywood may have gotten a little bit thrown off. This is in katakana. This is not the kanji. The way aniki would typically be written is in kanji. And aniki is the same word that, what's his name? The beaver man who gives us all our tools. Hammer. It's the same word he uses when he calls us bro.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
aniki.
Like big bro.
Yes,
yeah.
Big bro. So this guy's using the same word, aniki, except it's in katakana. I don't know why they wrote it in katakana.
Huh.
And so that makes I believe that threw Honeywood off.
Well, he puts there. So maybe it's him thinking like, I don't know how to
Well,
translate
that's
this.
the first part.
I'm counting on you.
Which is mo, or no, mu.
Oh,
mu.
so he does say
Yeah, but not really. The mu doesn't necessarily mean It's just a sound. It's just or it's just a sound. It doesn't really necessarily mean Well, is just a sound too, I guess. I don't know. I can kind of see where he's coming from.
Groan. Like,
it's more like Yeah, it's not it's more like ugh.
Castle.
UGH. Exactly. It's UGH or something like that. Ugh. And then aniki atowa. So little brother, after this, I'm counting on you for the next thing.
Brother.
After this,
big
right?
Brother, yeah.
Big brother, I'm counting on you after this. So I get why he was thrown off. I can kind of see it a little bit.
And clearly that's in reference to the Giant Wels that's outside, right?
And so a better translation would be like, older brother, after this, I'm counting on you.
Yeah.
Done. And that would be way better.
Way better.
Instead of, I'm counting on you. You have no idea what he's talking about.
Like he can't even think of what to say. I'm counting on you. Done.
But you know what they could have done? I'm counting on you, in quotes. At least that would have given us the idea that he was referring to someone other than us.
That there's something else after this, yeah.
Because, so then the next response here from Billy, which makes no sense, is aniki datte. Aniki datte is him saying, you mean aniki? Like did you say aniki? Like that would be
Yeah.
how you would say that, right? Aniki. Oh, he said aniki. He said older brother. Okay, and then the next one is kore de yondeko, which is, okay, then I'll call him with this. Now, this is also confusing. I believe he's referring to, because he does a thing on the computer, and I believe he called the orphanage, right?
Yes.
He
He's
sent a
signaling
message.
the orphanage.
That is so not clear at all.
In the English, yeah.
In the Japanese as well.
Even in the Japanese?
In the Japanese as well. So the part that's more clear is when he says older brother, like as if he's referencing what that guy says.
Yeah.
That's more clear in the Japanese than in the English. But with the English, when he says kore de yonde oko, that is the same. I believe that was actually translated more or less correctly, and it's purposely vague, I suppose. But at least we know he's not referring to the older brother. He's just referring to something else.
Well, the way that they did it here is, big brother, is it? Better call for it now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Better call for it. But
he's
there's no it.
referencing the gear, but
He is, but that's actually not clear. So he says better call for it, but as you know, the it they don't say the word it.
They don't say
I mean, they can, but they don't. They didn't in this sense.
They often leave out the pronoun.
It's omitted, yes.
Yeah.
So whoever translated this, knowing the context, I suppose, put the word it in, which makes sense, but the word it is not in the Japanese. It's just as vague in the Japanese.
Okay.
And he could be referring to the older brother in the Japanese as well, just the way that it reads. It is a little bit confusing. I will give Honeywood a pass on this
that's
because
just how Japanese is. It's tough to to gather who they're talking about sometimes.
It is. But we're kind of not supposed to know exactly what he's talking about, though. Because the orphanage is moving around and we're like, what are they doing? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But if he said specifically, I better call for my gear, then we wouldn't be as surprised when a gear shows up from the ground of the orphanage, I suppose.
Yeah.
And flies out, right?
Well, and then
that was pretty surprising
all
for
the
me.
kids are like operating.
Yes, it's so funny.
The like mechanics of this like hidden door on the seesaws.
Yes.
They're like on the seesaws and they're like
Every part of the orphanage is not, it's like they're using child labor. It's like they're not doing this for fun. They're all tools that work in a gear that opens this thing that launches a gear.
Launches the gear.
Yeah, it's so funny. Even the little weather vane on top of the thing, there's a kid on it that's like, we gotta call. But my favorite part is at the end of that whole sequence when the kid's like, that wasn't very good.
That launch was so-so.
Yeah, that launch was so-so. And we're just like, holy crap.
Yeah. Good stuff.
But yeah,
really
as far as the Japanese goes, it is not super clear in the Japanese either, at least for Billy's line. And the katakana use for Bloody's line does throw you off a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it is a Japanese word. But why is it in katakana? I think that's what threw him off.
That is weird and interesting.
Yeah.
I actually I have no memory of this part with the Giant Wels. I was like, what the frick? I was like,
from before?
I guess we're fighting. I just did not remember this. So you battle this Giant Wels in your, they like walk out onto some kind of bridge thing. And they're like, oh no, like in time.
Billy's like, it's coming, just wait. And this huge monster's coming towards us.
And then the gear saves them just before they get swiped at by the Wels. And then they land over on the Yggdrasil and then you battle against this Giant Wels. I had no memory of this. It just was ejected from my memory. There's been a couple times this has happened where it's like, oh man, I didn't remember this part at all. There's a lot of stuff in this game to remember. But anyways, you kill that Giant Wels and...
hold on, because this is another weird line. This was, Elly says, who's its buddy?
Oh, yeah.
Because Billy says, better call the buddy, which is the bro, Aniki, right? But, weird.
Yeah, I just kind of glazed over this because I was like, there's no way this is how it was supposed to be translated.
This is what Billy says. He goes, it's probably its brethren, a Giant Wels.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Billy's a priestly man, right?
Yeah.
Referring to a brother as
brethren
is a thing, but brethren is plural, isn't it?
Yeah, it's plural.
And... but Japanese doesn't really denote plural. They technically can, but they often don't.
Yeah.
But aniki is typically only singular, so I don't know. He uses a plural, the plural brethren. Now, how would you what is the high speech like brethren, but for singular brother? There isn't one.
There isn't one.
It's just
It's
brother,
just brother,
right?
yeah.
But I think he wanted to give Billy the high speech.
Like the priestly way
Yeah,
of saying
or
it.
he didn't know that that there's only one brother and not multiple. But yeah, this should not be brethren. It's this is just a weird sentence anyways. Oh, it's probably its brethren.
Yeah, it's should be. You're talking about a singular thing, but using a plural.
It's brother. That's what it should say. Oh, it's probably its brother. So Billy's line here with it's probably its brethren doesn't actually exist in the Japanese. Instead, he just says, which is Kito. It's surely it's a Giant Wels thing. Like definitely his brother will be a Giant Wels or something like that.
Yeah.
So when Elly says, who's its buddy? She's saying, oh, who's the Aniki? And Billy's like, it's probably something like a Giant Wels or something. That's what he says. But in the English, they said, it's probably its brethren. And that's in part because he didn't use the word brother
earlier for
Aniki, and so he's making up for it here when he could have just gone back and changed the translation. But he's making it clear that it's a brother, not just a buddy, I suppose. But in the Japanese, he just clarifies, must be a Giant Wels.
Well, kind of hard to work through what they're talking about in the English there, but there's a Wels boss, Bloody, that you fight, and he calls for his big bro to come save to do the rest of the work after he's gone.
He's counting on him.
That's all that's really going on there.
That's all that's going on. But there's several translation errors here that are a little bit
it makes it hard
weird.
to
Makes it hard to understand.
The English lines are just funky.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after this point, you got to go back and report this to the Ethos. But the Ethos is under attack when you show up. Everybody's dead.
Yeah, this was I literally gasped when I walked into the church
nice.
and everyone was dead. I was like, I was not expecting this. Because the Ethos, they've spent quite a bit of time within the game showing us that, they aren't who you think they are. These are powerful people, and they might be a little shady, and they aren't who you think they are.
Yeah.
And so the thought that
they would be vulnerable
just,
or get attacked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't seem like they would be vulnerable in any way. And they also seemed like, even though they're doing shady stuff, that most of them are still good people who don't know, kind of like Billy. And so as soon as we get in, and it's just a massacre, that was very shocking for me.
Yeah. And so there are these assassins that are running around killing everybody. And initially, Billy finds a shell casing that he says belongs to his father, so he assumes his dad is here massacring everyone.
Yes.
And he's like, what on earth is going on?
Yeah.
You go further in, people are, being massacred everywhere. Everybody is freaking dead.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of notes that I took while going through here. One is that Billy says that the Ethos is more than capable of fighting. I mean, these are Etones, right? They're like warrior priests, right? But that it looks like there was almost no resistance given, or something to that effect. I'll have to find the actual quote and put it on screen. But like as they're trying to put the pieces together, just something about this does not seem right. Additionally, there are a couple of jail cells here in the Ethos headquarters where you can like rescue some prisoners.
Yes, the dude, the fighter man. Big Joe's in there.
He's like, thanks for saving me, adios. He just like walks out. Okay. But the other one is like an agent of Shabbat who had been tortured, right?
I didn't know that at first.
Well, yeah, it's
when we first saw her, it was like she can't talk.
Yeah.
And I was like, she's undergoing.
I think it's a man, by the way.
Oh, it's a guy.
I also thought it was a girl. I also thought it was a girl at first, but then when he comes and talks to you on the bridge of the Yggdrasil later, they clarify it's a man.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So he can't speak like hardly at all, and all he can say is all I can say is Shavat, something like that. I need to get back to Shavat, and that's it. But it made me think of Billy's little sister and people who can't talk for whatever reason. I still don't know why it is, but it has something to do with the Ethos, I think, and that she was in the process of being turned into something like a Reaper or something like that, because she was in this weird cell. Now, these cells seem to be prisons, but that seemed to me to be what was going to happen with Big Joe, right? He'd been captured. He was likely going to be turned into a thing and sent away somewhere and never seen again.
Yeah.
So I assumed that would be true of this person too, who couldn't speak. Very strange. Now, the end of this playthrough tells me that that was incorrect, but that's what it seemed to me.
Yeah. So you basically call in Bart and Rico to like help this person escape, right?
Yeah.
Like to take care of this person who's clearly like traumatized badly by what happened there. And that person will come in again here in a minute, back on the Yggdrasil. But then we get some huge reveals about the Ethos. They get down into like the depths of the
there's
Ethos
like
headquarters,
a computer
where
database.
they have their data bank, basically.
Yeah,
right?
of like everything that they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is a huge, earth-shattering reveal for Billy.
Yes.
And there's a couple of things, like it's pretty straightforward. It's not like there's a lot to necessarily break down about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty simple in that the Ethos is like a shadow subsidiary organization for Solaris.
Yeah.
And they're basically there to manage the earth-dwelling lambs,
Right.
some of whom are sent up to Solaris, right? But also resources, sending resources from the excavations and things like that, and is putting up a front used to control, with a fake religion that is used to control the people, right? So that they don't become, suspicious of Solaris in any way,
Right.
so that their wars continue between themselves, like we've been talking about through the whole
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, it's all part of the manipulation.
You know, manipulating them by keeping their eyes away from Solaris. Right?
Yeah. And
what they're
I
doing.
kind of figured as much because the Ethos is most active in Ave.
Yes.
And Ave is completely controlled by Gebler.
Yes.
And it seemed to be that they would have that connection with
Right.
with Solaris.
There are a couple of other things that clarify some of these setups we've had about previous time periods. They've talked about it's something that happened 500 years ago a couple of times.
Yes.
You know, they've talked about this Zeboim civilization that's
Yes.
even more ancient than that.
Yeah.
So we start now to get some clarification on those time periods and what happened in those time periods. So Elly has a line where she says, 500 years ago there was a great war that occurred between Solaris and the land dwellers. It's not clear what the outcome was, but after the war, Solaris feared another land dweller revolt. So Solaris built a gate or barrier that separates Solaris from the rest of the world's land. The land dwellers who lived within this gate were made to dwell as separate races and were thus supervised. To carry out the actual supervision, Solaris established the Ethos.
So the Ethos has only been established since 500 years ago.
So
They did not exist previous to
the
that.
result of that war basically led Solaris to set this up so that they would not have another revolt, so that the land dwellers would fight themselves, would believe in a religion that would keep them from ever being suspicious of Solaris or even knowledgeable about Solaris, really in any way. So it's all set up for control, right? They also point out that the job that the Thames was sent on, right, this excavation deep into the ocean, was not being reported by the Ethos back to Solaris.
Yes, that
The
was
Ethos
revealed.
was doing this against Solaris's knowledge, and as an attempt to break away from Solaris's control.
If they ever got a big enough like piece of tech or something important enough, then they would use it against Solaris.
Right. So the Ethos, Pontiff, and some of the other leaders were planning to break away from Solaris and dominate the world themselves. So this was a internal rift between the Ethos and Solaris.
Which seems to be a theme of this game.
Yes.
That they aren't all in agreement.
And so what they were trying to excavate was technology from Zeboim, which is even more ancient technology than a lot of the stuff that they are excavating in Ignis that is from the 500-year-ago war between Solaris and the land dwellers, right? This Zeboim era is 4,000 years ago. So it's even more ancient.
Or 34,999,999 hours ago.
Yes, that number that they look at. Yeah, exactly. Which I think if you break that down, it gives you a very technical number of years, which is like 3,900.
It's almost
something.
4,000.
It's almost 4,000 years, not quite. But anyways, the Ethos was looking to monopolize that technology and take over the world themselves. So we have this attempted split, and this is why the massacre has happened. This is Solaris coming down and killing all of the corrupt Ethos people.
Yeah, I didn't quite see that coming.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it's very confusing to be like, why would Solaris do this? And this is, I mean, it's confusing to the game players, possibly not to Satan. But we learned pretty quick. I think as we're on our way out from that computer, we meet up with Bishop Stone.
Bishop Stone and Velrain before that.
Yes.
Who come in and exposit to Billy like what's actually going on, and this religion you believed in was all fake. And the way that this is written can be a little confusing, I feel. And I don't want to bog down too much by like digging into the Japanese on this to see if there was there's difference. But Velrain basically like condescendingly talks to Billy about, did you really believe such a being exists, referring to God?
Yes.
Which can give the impression that Velrain and the Solarians don't believe in any God.
I started to wonder about that, actually.
But I think that that's confusing. It's not that they don't believe in a God, or that, Solaris doesn't have like some kind of goal that has to do with God, which is what we've been seeing the whole time with Graf and the Gazelle Ministry and, talking about this. So they do. It's just that this is a different one. This was an invented fake God that they made for the Ethos religion. Right. And he's just talking about that God not being real.
That makes sense. I mean, that's a good explanation.
Not God that they've been referring to as the one that they're trying to either kill or resurrect or whatever.
Right.
So
I was going to say, God is definitely real in this game in some way.
Yes.
Not,
And we've had Emperor Cain and others talking about God. And the
Graf.
Resurrection of God, or Graf saying we want to kill God.
Yes.
They do know about God, and God is real, and they believe in God.
And they take it seriously.
They're just, Velrain, I think, here is just specifically talking about the Ethos God, which was all a front. And so, anyways, the way that that's written, it can make it seem like, the Solarians, they don't believe in God, but I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
But then he gets a little too chatty about what they're doing, as villains tend to do, and Bishop Stone walks in and shoots him.
He kills him, I know. At first I thought it was Jesse that shot him.
Yeah. Well, Jesse does come in and shoot somebody.
Jesse shows up.
And Billy's like, what are you doing, massacring people? He's like, you should know by the sound, these are stun bullets or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. They're tranquilizers.
They're just taking a nap or whatever, which I thought was funny. But so Jesse is there as Velrain is explaining all of this.
So when the gunshots hit, I thought it was him, but then the bishop walks in.
Yeah.
It's clear it was him.
And so then Bishop Stone then kind of continues explaining a lot of these things in more detail. In particular, he begins to explain to Billy that his job is in Etone, where he's killing Wels. He's about to say what that really means.
And it was kind of like a you can't handle the truth kind of moment. Like, do you really, can you bear the burdens of the truth?
Right.
And Billy's, I don't know.
Thinks he can.
Yeah, but, well, I guess he can, because he does eventually figure it out.
Yeah.
But it's a little more of a process. It wasn't really
as Bishop Stone is about to tell him what Reapers or Wels really are.
Yeah.
Which they play this off like this is this huge reveal. But we've already talked to people in the Ethos earlier who said that Wels were humans.
Yeah, we know about
So we kind of already knew that.
Yeah.
I guess in the Ethos way of describing it is that these people were turned into this as a punishment from God or something like that.
Right.
And obviously it's like Solaris is doing this.
Yeah, it's like not so much punishment, it's just a random selection, maybe.
Yeah. So anyways, they play it off like it's a big reveal, but we already know, if you've been talking to NPCs anyway, that Reapers are humans. But Jesse kind of steps in to like stop him from saying this. He's like, all right, you're talking way too much. Like,
right, to protect his sons.
And then, of course, you have the tropey villain thing. You know, it would give me so much pleasure to just like rip you apart and kill you now. But I have more important things to do, and I have to hurry away.
Yeah.
I had time to spend like 5-10 minutes explaining all of this, but right
Yes.
now I'm out of time. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's a little strange. Yeah.
Okay, whatever, man. Villain trope. He takes off. You fight some dudes, and then the gear that they take off in. I think Jesse explained something about it not being like the fastest gear ever, that they can catch up to it. But they're afraid that the Thames is going to get attacked because the Thames was doing this job for the Ethos, and
Yes.
now Solaris is trying to stop them
Yes.
from doing that.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh crap, we got to go rescue the Thames. And the fleet, there's more than just Thames. There's several ships in this like fleet of like little excavation ships, whatever you call them.
Yeah.
Frigates, and it gets like attacked by that fishbowl ship we've been seeing.
Yeah, they say fishbowl.
That's how it's referred to by the captain and
Yes.
others on the Thames.
But in Japanese, he says a different word. He says he calls it an octopus trap, which is
Octopus
great. Have you
trap?
ever seen an octopus trap before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's
So it's what you would catch
it's
an
a
octopus in.
takotsubo. Yeah, so it's a pot. Yeah, it looks like a fishbowl, but it's like a pot, and the octopus will hide inside of it, stays there, and the octopus will. It's kind of like a monkey when they put their hand in the trap and they can't get their
they
hand
can't
out because
get it
they don't
out.
want to let go of what they're holding,
Right.
and so they're stuck. Well, the octopus will not leave if the jar gets moved. So you go, you pick up the jar, the octopus stays there. You bring it up to land, and then you've just got an octopus there, and he thinks that he should just hide. He won't get out. And so then you just kill it and hang it up, and it's easy.
Oh, that's interesting.
He calls it an octopus trap. Yeah.
In Japanese.
Yes, which is like a clay pot. It's less of a
Yeah.
fishbowl. That's not
Interesting.
important. It's just an interesting note.
Well, I mean, it's a cultural difference where,
Yes,
I mean, like
yes.
in Japan, right, they obviously do a lot of fishing and things
Yeah,
like
the
that. They
coastal-
eat octopus
yeah.
more often there. And
Like the word makefeke is a Hawaiian word. So
Yeah.
it's like, these island cultures do a lot of
would
that kind
be
of
a
stuff.
lot more culturally understood as
Yeah.
a reference.
Dude, no one in America would have understood
Some Midwesterner
Yes.
kid playing.
an octopus trap.
I don't know what that even
Well,
looks
I
like.
would have
right?
thought of like a bear trap or like a cage or something, like what
Yeah.
the heck's he referring to?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So he
So,
changed it to fishbowl.
Good
to
job on Richard Honeywell. We
more
we
understood.
rip on him here sometimes.
by
for-
some kid from freaking Ohio or whatever.
Exactly. He did a good job with this one.
So yeah, but you get there too late. The fleet gets attacked. The
Yeah.
Thames doesn't get destroyed, but
Well,
all the other ships do.
I thought it did because it kind of looked like it did.
it did look like it.
But I guess not. But the thing that the fishbowl shoots out was a very familiar looking set of beams that
Yes.
basically is when we destroyed Lahan village and Veltal shot out these beams in all these different directions. It was basically that exact thing.
Yeah.
But this was coming from, do we know what it's called? Fishbowl ship?
We don't know what
That's
it's
what we
called
call
yet.
it? Okay.
We're just calling it fishbowl ship for now.
But it shoots out basically the same attack that Weltal is equipped to do, apparently.
But then it also drops like some more giant wells.
Yes, tons, yeah.
And
Yeah, like
the
dozens.
Thames kind of fights them off
Yeah.
with its cannon and gears that
And
are
gears,
equipped
yeah.
on it. But anyways, when we finally get there, it's kind of in the aftermath of a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And more or less, it's like, well, the captain's like, we're all right, but they went north to that like dig site. Like that's where you should go next, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
He does his Men of the Sea thing again.
Yes.
I thought it was pretty funny, though, because he's like, I'd like to say that we are men of the sea, but we're actually in a lot of trouble.
yeah,
But it does the whole camera thing, so I thought that was great.
yep, I love that. So you head just north of that position to the Ethos dig site, the elevator that takes you down deep into the ocean to where this Zeboim city,
Yes, yeah.
which has been hidden in some kind of cavern deep in the ocean, where it's
Yeah.
located.
Just like ancient ruins.
But I also liked how, I can't remember exactly where this happened, but it was, I think, before you go down. Billy asks Citan, what is Solaris trying to do? Because his world has been totally turned upside down. It's like
Yeah.
what is Solaris trying to do here? And Citan, as always, avoids answering questions.
Yes.
He says he's almost talking to himself more than Billy.
I have a note on
He says,
this one.
the main Solaris army, why all this? Well, let's go down.
Yes.
So he doesn't answer Billy's question at all, and he
Yes.
seems to be struggling to understand even why Solaris is doing
Which is
what they're doing.
probably it's among the first times, possibly the first time, that Satan does not know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Especially as it relates to Solaris. The Japanese is interesting though. He's talking specifically about the home army of the Solarians.
Yeah, he
So-
says the main Solaris army.
The main
in
Solaris
English.
army, but this one says the home country army, right?
yeah.
But I mean, that's more or less it. But what he's saying is, why go through the trouble? So when it says why all of this,
Ooh.
what he says here is naze waza waza, which means why go through the trouble, basically.
I like that
So
better.
instead of being why all this it's why bother with what they're doing right now.
I like that way
Yeah,
better.
way better. It made
better.
me understand a lot more of this.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Well, let's go down anyway." So but it's just that one like word that they could have put in there that would
Why
have.
bother with all this?
Why bother? So now we're clued in a little more to what Satan was thinking at the time.
Yeah.
Instead of why all this, it's why bother with all of this. So that means Solaris is going to a lot more trouble to stop the lambs from something that even Satan is kind of. I think Satan is realizing that
Thinks
there's
it's
a gap in his
excessive.
knowledge. That Satan's
Yeah.
like, there's something I don't understand here, and it's really eating at him.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Good call there with the Japanese. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So then we get a scene with Miang and Graf again. Graf's kind of just like doing his like pose thing underwater, just kind of like thinking,
I
or
love
just
it.
waiting, or doing
I
whatever
love
he's
it.
doing
Whatever he
underwater.
does with all that power, that
He's just
got.
kind of sitting there pondering the situation, I guess.
And Miang just kind of video chats him. She just like calls up on his
Yeah.
screen.
And she has some good lines here. One thing that we have talked about when we reach the end of the podcast, going back through certain scenes and reevaluating some of these vague
Sure. Yeah.
things that people say
Yeah.
with the context, like putting it together. I think we'll try to definitely do that more with the Gazelle Ministry stuff, because that's just really hard
Yeah.
to grasp.
We
what they're
already
talking
skipped
about.
a whole thing of them talking
I'm-
because they don't say anything.
Like
as far
I think
as
it
I
was
can tell.
2 episodes ago that we spent a lot of time like looking at all these things
And
they
just
said,
kind of
and
cut
at the
it
end of
out.
it, I just felt like that was such a waste of time, because you can't understand what they're saying, and so much of this is badly translated too.
Yeah.
So let's just wait until we know what they're talking about, then come back and
And then
try to
analyze
evaluate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with Miang, her and Graf's conversations are a little better as setups, I feel, than the Gazelle Ministries are.
I had a note on specifically one of her lines. That
Yeah,
kind of
she
made me
she
wonder.
just calls in. Did you notice his gear is reawakening? So this is the first time we've heard not of he is
Yes.
reawakening, but his gear is reawakening.
That is the note that I took. And
Yeah.
I am quite perplexed as to this specifically. So the gear awakens, soon he will reawaken. So what I wrote down, because then she says soon he will reawaken too. Well, he's already awoken several times, but I think she means in a more permanent manner, I suppose. Right? Soon he
We'll
will
see, yeah.
permanently awake. I don't know. Although he isn't in quotes, was it?
Yeah, so his gear is reawakening. Soon he himself will awaken also.
Yeah. So the gear, but, and tell me if I'm going the right direction with this. So what I wrote down here was, it was the gear that was reawakening, but the gear is the anima, right? So the anima is awakening first, and the anima is like the deep down spirit. The anima is even further removed from the subconscious, right? So it's like a whole level down. And in Jung's work, there's an awakening at the deepest levels of faith that will eventually rise to the top. Am I on the right
You are so on the right track. With this.
track? Okay, good.
It's not totally clear yet, and so I'm
No.
going to wait a little bit.
Not even
But you're on the right track.
Okay.
If you'll remember, the Gazelle Ministry talks
They
a lot about the
refer-
anima relics
Yes.
and animus.
And the animus.
This
yeah.
is going to start to make more sense with
Okay.
the gears and things like that. So you're absolutely on the right
And
track.
I think it
with
was right before this. We did see a little Gazelle ministry back and forth, and they
Yes.
mentioned anima specifically, and that's why it was in my mind when I came here.
this. Yes.
Okay.
So, but also, one thing. Well, I'll wait to say this until just a little bit later. But yeah, okay, I'll wait on that for just
Okay,
a
fair
few
enough.
minutes. For just a few minutes.
Okay.
So let's get through the rest of this. She goes. His friends are heading for Zeboim. It's been sealed up for 4,000 years. You know what's there better than I do. So she's talking to Graf specifically, that he knows about Zeboim better than she would know about Zeboim.
Well, at the very end of this playthrough, we did encounter someone who is 522 years old.
Yes.
So, how old is Graf? Is what
Right.
that makes me wonder.
Right.
How old is Graf? So
We-
it's possible Graf was literally there.
We are starting to put context around two specific time periods.
Yeah.
The Zeboim 4,000 years ago era and the 500 years ago era, the war between Shavat and Solaris.
Yes, where we finally know his name now, where
Yes.
Red Hair Man
Yes.
shows up
Yes.
and ruins everything for Solaris, basically.
Right. So we're starting to get clarification on these two things. But Graf, it seems Miang is attaching him to the Zeboim
To the
era.
Zeboim, the 4,000 year ago thing, yeah.
And we'll get more context on the 500 year ago era when we reach Savat a little later in the playthrough here. But
Yeah.
anyways, important that she points Graf to that era. And he's just kind of sitting there. He doesn't say anything in response to this conversation.
He doesn't
He's just
like
listening.
Miang, and
No.
he does not trust her. But she
So-
kind of has a favor to ask of him, right?
Yeah, his friends are heading to Zeboim. It's been sealed up for 4,000 years. You know what's there better than I do. He probably won't give anyone anything, but it's something we both need. You know what I mean? So please. So she's asking
Right.
him to do something, and she's a little, I don't think Faye is going to do anything or give them anything regarding this Zeboim era, but we do both need this, so can you please do something about it? More or less, right? So she's trying to incite Graf to
And I
do
can't
something
remember,
about
do we get any clue as to whether Graf will comply in
not,
this scene?
Not in this scene
Okay.
and not in the play session,
Okay.
as far as I know, or as far as I remember. So then you get down into the city itself. There's a bridge, and it's a really cool shot of them walking across the bridge, and you can see
Yes,
the
it
big
looks
cityscape.
real. It's huge.
Massive.
It is huge, and it looks really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as they're crossing that bridge, Elly seems to start talking differently, and
Yes.
Saiten notices this.
He's
and,
like, Elly, what's
you know,
wrong?
what's
Yeah.
going- But she says, I know it well. Yes, the cavern city Zeboim. When we were buried in that vast mausoleum, and then
Yes.
Saiten's like, Elly, Elly, he's like yelling at her, like, what's wrong? Like something, I'm guessing that what's meant to is that she's almost in this trance-like.
The camera angle was not great on her for that
Yes.
moment, and I don't know if this was done on purpose. I can't remember if I could change it or not. But it was set to where the city was in the background. She was on the bridge,
Yeah.
but she was kind of behind a structure or a gate or a pole.
yeah.
I couldn't actually see her all that well
Yeah.
to notice if she was doing something, and she was facing away, so I just couldn't tell if she was having a weird reaction, like she did before when she would like
Yes.
start shaking. And
I assume that's the intention here. is
I would
that
think
she's
so.
acting
because
really.
do you know how I
weird.
read this the first time? Before I thought that like, oh, must be acting weird. I read this as she's like, oh, back when we were buried in the mausoleum, and Satan's like, Elly, you're giving away too much information.
Oh,
Elly,
like they're-
Elly.
Like they're.
Because he
working
cut her
together or
off right as
something.
she was saying something crazy important that what the heck is she referring to?
Yeah.
We were buried in a mausoleum. What's she talking about? And Satan cut her off and is trying to get her to stop. That's how I first read it. I'm
Okay.
really, anyways, I'm really not thinking the same about Satan as I used to. But then after he's like, what's wrong? And she's like, what did I read that initially as, what, did I give away too much info?
Oh.
And did I say that? Did I do something? Oh, whoops! I'm sorry, Satan. I ruined our plan. Right? That's the way it seemed. It
see,
wasn't
yeah,
until
I can see
was
that.
like, "This is weird. This is wrong." And I went back and rewatched that part just to see, just on YouTube, and just to see that scene. And it's not that at all. Like it seems to be that Satan is like, something's wrong with you, Elly. Like, why are you're being weird?
Yes.
You're acting different.
Yes.
I really didn't read it that way.
They didn't
at first,
make it
though.
clear enough that Elly is in some kind of like trance.
Yes, they did.
State.
They do later on.
Yes,
in the
it
playthrough.
clarifies when you get down to the bottom. And
Yeah,
she's like,
and
on
she's
the
like, "Why
computer."
am I talking like this? What's
Yeah.
going on with me?"
Yeah.
But
I agree.
this was a very, very difficult, very strange scene for me at first.
Yeah, and so she's like, huh, what did I just do or whatever? And he's like, oh, no, nothing. Don't worry about it. Hurry on ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
So something is overcoming her in this place.
But when she says "we," it's plural, right?
Yes.
She didn't say I. She said
Yeah,
we were buried
We.
in a mausoleum. And that could refer to all of humanity. That could just refer to
Her and someone else.
whatever her version of whatever's in the back of her mind that takes her over sometimes. That's a different thing that's been around for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Could be all sorts of things.
We've already had earlier in the game, right, this sort of interesting tie between Elly looks like Sophia, and Sophia is from the 500 year ago time.
Yes.
But now, Elly is seeming to tie herself to the Zeboim time period as well, when we were buried in this mausoleum. And as you go down further, you get down like to the bottom of this place, and you go. There's like a little hallway that goes into kind of like a laboratory area, and there's another door on the right before you go into that little corridor.
Oh yeah.
And if you go in there and Saitan tries to use the computer, he's like, "Oh, it's no good. We don't have a password."
Right.
So you go back in this other room, and there's some blood on the floor.
Yes.
And Elly walks up to this blood and says, "Blood, covered in blood, my blood.
Yes.
There was no pain, just coldness and sadness. She has been here all this time by herself."
So when Elly had her freak out moment, it was in like a long corridor where she like killed people on accident.
Yes,
when
they used drive on her.
Yeah, when they used drive on her, it was down a corridor. This was a long time ago. So she's like, what, 18 or something?
Yeah,
So
like a few years
it would have
ago.
just been
Couple
in the
years
past
ago.
few years.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't have been this corridor, right?
Yeah.
So the blood she's seeing is not blood from the past memory.
No.
Okay,
This is from the Zeboim era, right?
yeah.
Because she knows the password to get onto that computer. Like she goes in there after Saitan said, "I don't have the password. I can't use this."
Yeah.
She goes in there and like logs in
No,
and
she
like starts a
said
process.
something about I remember this room. She says that specifically. I remember
Yeah.
this room. It's lonely in here.
Yes.
Something like that in
Yes.
the computer room. So she sees the blood, and she's like, "This is my blood." And then she's in the computer, and she's like, "I remember this room.
Yes.
It's lonely in this room."
Yes.
And I think that might be where she's like, "Why am I doing this?" Like she kind of like is like, "Why do I keep saying this stuff?"
Yeah, so that's as she's like typing on the computer, she says, "O vessel for a new soul, may the soul who resideth in you find peace."
Yes.
And then Satan comes in and says, "No, Elly, we don't know what could happen." And
Well-
she says, "Satan, who am I? What am I doing? What am I saying?"
Yes, there you go. That was it.
So,
But what she said though, read that again.
"O
that first
vessel
part.
for a new soul, may the soul
Vessel
who
for a new
resideth
soul.
in you find peace."
May the soul who resideth in the vessel find peace. I don't. That's weird. But this place does manufacture people. It seems
Yes.
right. And these people,
nanotechnology.
yeah, there's some nanotechnology that they can literally create a body like a person using a computer.
Yes.
And when she uses the word vessel for thy soul,
For a
something
new
like that,
soul, yeah.
I believe it would be referring to this, right?
Yes.
So they're creating a vessel for a new soul. And then what else does she say?
May the soul who resideth in you find peace.
So the souls are looking for peace and cannot find it. So this machine has been constructed to create a body so that the soul can enter into it and find peace. Something along those lines, right? I think that's what's happening here.
Can't give too much away at this time.
Based on what she
But,
said, that's
yeah.
the purpose. Because when we see later on, when we see these manufactured people, or at least one of them, the idea being what is this? What is this for? What's the purpose of this? And it might be hinting that Elly herself might be one of these manufactured people. That's what I would take from this whole thing, is that Elly is a fake person that was given a soul, but she's I think they use this word later on, a fake person, something like that. Anyways,
Okay.
that's what I'm taking from this.
I want to come back to that later.
Well, I appreciate
Okay.
you not telling me yes or no.
Okay, so you enter in the room and yeah, there's a little girl with green hair who is like formed inside of this tank, this
it
test
kind of
tube.
rises up, yeah.
And with nanotechnology, as Bishop Stone clarifies when he walks in, right?
Yes.
He calls her a nanomachine colony, and basically goes on to say that this technology is like the key to the salvation of mankind.
Right, somehow.
He says that that is the existence, pointing to the nanomachine colony. That is the existence or key factor which God will guide us by to free humanity from its yoke. And, Satan or Billy, depending on who you have in your party. If Billy's not there, then Satan will do all this talking. If Billy's there, Billy will do all the talking because of his conflict with Stone at this point, right?
Right.
And he kind of presses him about it, and Stone eventually says, actually, Krellian hasn't told me much, nothing apart from the salvation of humankind. So Stone doesn't totally understand the purpose of the nanotechnology other than this is the key to saving humankind, according to Krellian, who he serves.
Well,
and then I guess we glossed over a little bit that Krellian was shown for the first time on that attack on the Thames fleet. So he was in the octopus trap.
Yes. Yeah.
That octopus trap thing that flies around, the fishbowl
Yes,
ship.
the fishbowl.
That is Krellian's ship.
Okay.
So Krellian, you saw him very briefly there. He's like on the bridge, and they're talking about the excavation dig site or something, and he kind of like closes his eyes as he like reflects, and he like kind of looks up, and he's like, what is the exact quote from him? I'm trying to remember exactly what he says. So he says something about what they've been looking for 4,000 years or something like that. It's very vague. It's not like super direct or in particular, but like you just see him. He is introduced there for the first time on that ship. So Krellian, this is who he is. Krellian is the person who is commanding Stone to do all of this. So Stone is acting under Krellian's command, which means Krellian wanted the Ethos massacred and destroyed, and their excavations into this Zebulon era stopped. Krellian is at the head of this. So, anyways.
Well, okay, now I'm thinking a little bit more, though. So this girl that was made, so the compute did it take 4,000 years to make a girl, or did Elly walk in and make the girl right then and there?
I don't want to say too much, but I will point back to her dialogue right here, where she says, she has been here all by herself for all this time. And then goes into the computer and like forms it up. And
was she talking about the body or the soul?
okay,
that's my question. Because we're making a body for your soul, the soul can get into it, or the body's been there with the soul, or whatever, or the body's just been there for 4,000 years.
We will get more clarification on this little girl as we keep playing.
Because this would have implications for another thing that I've been thinking about if she was created right then and there.
Yeah.
But that's something maybe I will talk about later.
So anyways, Bishop Stone thanks you for doing what he could not do, which is open the door to get in to retrieve the nanomachine colony.
Because Elly knew the password.
Yes.
That's correct, right?
Right.
How did Elly know the password? That's crazy.
Yes.
Yes, that is.
Well, there's a couple of other things that have connected her to this Zebulon era already, but then
and she can't remember even her own memories from like 15 years ago.
Right.
Or sorry, from like 3 years ago.
Right.
Her and Faye both, like before 3 years ago, don't remember anything.
Well, no, I don't think she has.
She doesn't remember?
She doesn't have retrograde amnesia.
I thought that she did. Because she doesn't remember Faye.
She doesn't remember Faye because the first time they've met is from when they met in the forest.
So
but they have a feeling that they've known each other longer than that.
Read that wrong then. I took that to mean that they both had met, of course, in their current life.
Yes.
Because I didn't know any of this
stuff.
No,
they had not met.
Okay, so now knowing this, I can infer a little bit more.
And we're going to get to a scene that gives a little bit more interesting context to that in a second, but before that, we got to talk about the elements because Bishop Stone leaves and uses these two element girls.
Talone
and Seraphita or something like that. These are, so we've had Dominia and Calvina, who we saw earlier.
Yes.
Those were the two elements that we've known so far. These are the other two, Talone and Seraphita.
It's interesting that they're all female.
Yeah.
The previous elements were all male.
Yes, right? That's correct. Yes,
so the former elements were male. These current elements are all female. It seems like, I don't know, it would seem as though that whatever they are, they would all be that same, so they'd all have that kind of in common, I suppose.
I don't know. Because as far as my memory serves, they don't do a whole lot of explaining the element program that much in the game, other than these are just really freaking powerful. They have a high potential, particularly with ether. So we haven't talked a ton about ether, and there is a chance to do a little bit more of that in a minute when you fight Stone for real, in his gear as a boss fight. So we'll get to that in a minute. But basically, ether, the ability to use magic, right? Ether is like magic.
Yeah, they bring up the word ether for the first time in this whole game.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
In the battle system, Elly, you can use ether. It's written on the UI. So you go to her ether commands, and she has magic that she can cast. Right.
For the dialogue, I mean, but that's true. That's true. Within the game, it is.
Ether is basically magic in this world. So, anyways, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the elements have high potential for using ether, I think.
Yeah.
At least these current elements do, for sure. So the dialogue here is really weird. And there's some really, really strange translation choices that were made. I've been thinking about this for 2 days now. And it is something that I kind of got started a little bit talking about with Greg Troyan, who's one of our viewers, and we go back and forth from time to time about the level of silliness or humor that is appropriate to the story or not. Right? My acceptance of, say, Hammer or the captain of the Thames as being this works.
Yeah.
But my rejection of Choo Choo, or in this case, Talon and Serafita in this scene. Right. I'm still working through trying to understand why I naturally don't accept this style in this instance, but I do for the others that I do, right? Why does this work for me in Xenogears and this doesn't?
Yeah.
Clearly, this game is full of really silly, lighthearted moments, goofy stuff,
many of them,
right? And these JRPGs that we grew up playing, they all were like that. So why is it that in some instances it really works for me and why in some others it doesn't? I'm still working through that, and I think I have a good answer for this that I will say or talk more about in full as we get to the end of this playthrough of the game, the whole game, I mean. And it relates back to the quote that Takashi said about how he wanted to get kids to think about some of these ideas. He knew that if he showed up and started trying to talk to kids about Gnosticism and Carl Jung and psychology and philosophy, that they wouldn't listen to him.
And he is,
right?
I think he's right about that.
But if I put it in the context, if I hide some of this or place some of it strategically within this shonen anime storyline, then it'll get those kids to think about it more, right?
I mean, fair enough. I think that's what he was trying to do, more or less.
So that has gotten me to reevaluate the way that I want to critique some of these instances where it's this isn't working, it feels too weird, it's juxtaposed with something really serious, and it makes it so that it undermines the scene. That's my initial reaction to it.
Yes.
And I don't feel like I'm wrong about that. However, there is maybe a particular audience he had in mind, he and Sorya Saga had in mind for the story.
And it was not people
who
already know about
mysticism. It was not intellectuals.
Yes.
He's not trying to talk to intellectuals
right.
here. He's trying to talk to kids so that they can start thinking about it more.
The problem is, once you dig deep into this game, you can't help, you have to, I'm not going to say you have to become an intellectual, because that's not as easy as it sounds, but you have to at least, you have to Do you know what I'm saying before I even say it?
Yes, I know what you're
Because I
trying
don't
to
know
say.
how to put this. You have to
It
learn
pushes
about
you
things
in that direction to
Yes.
start studying.
You have to become a
If you
psychology.
want to understand Xenogears,
Yeah.
the extent to which you wish
Yes.
to understand it, at the end of that journey, you will be an intellectual.
It's like a master class. Yeah, it's like a master class. It's like, I would say, like an associate's degree of college of material that you learn just by trying to understand this game and what it was trying to say.
Yes.
Which is very valuable, actually. The problem being, once you do that, you no longer can stomach the other aspects of the game, which I think is what you're getting at. It's difficult to palate the other parts because you had to be so serious about the serious parts. Like really a lot.
Well,
like to
and
understand this game, you have to take it very seriously.
It opens a pretty wide spectrum of levels of enjoyment that you can get from the game too. It's like you can just look at this as a shonen anime and not really understand all the references, and you can still really enjoy Xenogears because it's a great shonen anime story at that level, right?
I think so, sure.
Like it's got all of those elements. It's got great humor. It's got a nice balance between its lighthearted and its serious stuff.
Yeah, the characters are relatable. They're interesting.
It has a way of like intuitively delivering its message to where you feel it, even if you can't like articulate what it means necessarily.
Which is hard to do when you're doing what they tried to do.
It shows
So,
like a
kudos to them.
finesse on the storytelling side of it that I think is really quite profound.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I did not understand Xenogears very well the first time I played it, but I felt it. I felt its impact in my heart.
I think that would be true of most people who play this game. For the first
and it was because of what it made me feel, and being confused. How can I feel this when I don't really know what it was
What
about?
even happened? That's actually the mark of a transcendent.
Yes,
art.
it started my journey into the intellectual side,
Which
where
I think is what
studied it like crazy.
That's kind of what he wanted. Right?
Yes,
yeah,
that is exactly what he wanted.
He accomplished it.
So this is a
More
very
or less
long-winded, roundabout way of saying I don't like the way these characters are presented, but at the same time, I'm starting to come around on the idea that like this wasn't made for the super intellectual serious guy. This was made for a much wider audience so that they could start looking at those things more seriously. And so some of these things that are going to be in the game, you kind of have to be like, okay, it is what it is. It's an anime trope. I might not be terribly into that at this point in my life or whatever, but what the game provides underneath all of that is still so valuable and interesting that wave it aside. Just forget about it. Don't be so hard on this stuff. Right. So anyways, I don't love these characters and I don't love a lot of their back and forth. Like the humor doesn't land for me, but you know, the younger, I don't actually know if they're younger or older. The fire one, the red one, Tolone, I think.
Oh, she seems.
She's like thanking them for like opening up the lab for them to come in.
Yeah, she's like, that's what you do. Yeah,
and she's like, when people do you a kindness, you should always say thank you. That's what Grandma said, or something. Grandma always said. And you know the other one's like, shut up, you idiot! Like, stop being so dumb.
Don't thank people before you kill them.
That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't do it for me, humor-wise. It feels a little silly, excessively so.
Right.
That I'm gonna take. Well, obviously I can't. I'm not taking them seriously. They're not asking me to take them seriously. But these are elements. These are Dominia level elements.
These are the most powerful
these
people.
These are Citan and Sigurd. Level elements. They're like at that level of power, but they are little girls, and they act like little girls.
Yes.
And there's a disconnect there.
It's a selfie in Final Fantasy VIII level, where it's like you're a Navy SEAL, but you're just chilling about the cutesy stuff, you know.
Okay.
But there's another character that I think mimics her even closer, who I think if I mention her, that you'll maybe understand her a little bit better. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, is the Zuko's sister. Can't remember her name. She's horribly evil, right? Yeah. She's the Fire Lord really prefers her to Zuko, right? Because Zuko's not as strong as her. Right. she has a couple people who follow her around. They're her little consort, the other girls that are with her who are very powerful too.
Yeah.
One of them, I think it's Ty Lee. I could be wrong about her name. She's the flexible one who, she is this character. She is almost completely this character. She's very nice. She's very fun. Now, one of the things about her in general, like she would smile and flirt with Sokka while kicking his butt at the same time. She'd like wink at him and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was the weirdest thing. But with that character, and this is what I'm just now thinking through it, with that character, you did get a little bit of her backstory to where she actually doesn't want to be helping out the princess hurting people. That's not her thing. She wants to go to the circus and just be an acrobat. That's like her thing, right? But within this story, I don't know where it's going with Tolorene. But if it went that way, that would be interesting. But that is the way the Avatar took that character. But even before you knew that about her, she was an interesting character, and I see a lot of that here as well.
Yeah, and bringing up Avatar, I mean, there's another example of a show that clearly has like an audience that it's going for,
a young audience,
but can be enjoyed by anybody,
which is the real trick. Yeah,
because there's like
some
kids shows that those are designed for kids to watch and for parents to leave and go away
and not pay attention.
I don't want to listen to that another second. That is so irritating. And then there's kid shows. I think Pixar is a great example.
Oh yes,
where
they do.
There's like layers here, so that the kids they're mindful not only of the kids watching, but of the parents who took them to the theater to see the movie.
Yeah,
it's like we got to make sure that they are engaged
because the parents can't just leave the theater.
And I think
it's a different thing.
I think Xenogears fits that description.
Sure,
it's like something that people of a wide variety of ages and sort of like levels of interest in some of the more serious philosophical stuff can enjoy, and like maybe this is just one of those elements that's, exists for one part of the audience that I might not necessarily, what do they call those, where the circles?
Oh, the Venn diagram.
The Venn diagram, where we necessarily cross over. It's like this is over here in this circle and I'm this circle or something like that.
Yes.
Anyways, we've been on that for too long.
Okay.
But there is some weird translation stuff here, because she starts talking about Seraphita's. I might have the names totally backwards. I think it's Seraphita is the red one.
Oh,
Talone is the wind one. Anyways,
I didn't want to bother spelling those words, and so I didn't take a note of this.
Yeah, I can't remember who's who. This is how
not their names, but what she says. There's the word. It's very
red
technical.
One. See, this is how little this impacted me. I don't remember the names of who's who. The red one is talking about the wind one's gin and tonic brain or something like that. Gin and something.
She uses a pretend
She uses
word.
the wrong
gin and tonic
terminology.
Head,
And the other one gets upset. Like, oh, you're making me look bad by saying it that way, right? It's already bad enough as it is, she says. Positronic photon brain cyborg.
Yeah.
That's bound to get us in trouble with the makers of Star Trek. So
Star Trek. It's
spelled wrong, which is, geez. So
that prompted me to look this up in Japanese. And that's where I found out.
So when she's saying positronic photon brain cyborg, it's a reference to Data. Data has a positronic brain in Star Trek, right? That's what she's talking about. Mm. But this fourth wall breaking joke feels really out of left field to me.
It's horrible.
And
it's a bad
it is
joke.
not in Japanese at all, apparently.
I looked it up. It is not. So I just looked up the Star Trek line, and I did, after looking up that line, I did also see that the whole conversation is very minimalized, but I didn't actually take note of the whole conversation. So she does say it wrong. Okay, so she does say the name wrong. So Sasuga, of course, you're Purokuro. She just pronounces it completely wrong, right?
She just pronounces
so she pronounces the word completely wrong and actually says some completely wrong words, like talking about a cow and some other things, right? And then Tolone comes back and corrects her, saying, no, it's the positronic neutron brain. And that is where she says, right? Oh, that's bound to get caught in the inspection. That's what it would say in Japanese. That's bound to get caught in the inspection.
That's bound to get caught in the inspection.
That might be referring to people who look over the game to copyright check it. It might be a fourth wall break in the Japanese, but they don't reference Star Trek. But then Richard Honeywood took it upon himself to put in the Star Trek reference to make it more obvious.
That's weird.
So just to recap, Serafita says the name wrong, just like she does in English, including wrong words, and it makes it sound stupid. Tolone corrects her, and then Tolone then questions herself at what she just said and said, "Whoa, ooh, that's bound to get caught in the inspection." This is either way. This is a weird conversation.
It's weird.
It's very weird, and
it's not important.
It's just not as weird in the Japanese.
It's not important.
It is important to the extent that these characters were insufferable.
Yes.
Specifically to you, they were very hard to get by. And in the Japanese, they're not as insufferable.
It's such a weird, fetching scene in the midst of a really good one that just threw me off.
It's almost as if that's a rule within this game. Anytime we have too heavy of a scene, we have to lighten the mood immediately, like very quickly, like right away. And in fact, George Lucas kind of had a similar philosophy within his movies and within the prequels specifically. Yeah. He would do something very silly. He really did not like to show, like in episode 2, the romance between Anakin and not Leia, Padme, gets very strange and awkward in that scene kind of towards the end where it's implied that they decided to make a little baby. But there's like the fire and it's all dark and stuff.
Yeah, that's a very, very cringy scene.
It's awkward, but George Lucas wanted it to be awkward because he didn't want it to be serious romance because the kids don't like watching that. And he purposefully had these talented actors, well, at least on the part of Natalie Portman, very talented actress, kind of pull back a little and not be so good at acting on purpose so that this would be okay for kids to still consume.
Because they're very monotone and they're not very expressive.
It's a bad scene. It's a bad scene.
The dialogue itself is very...
Yes, it is not super well written. It's not very well delivered, but it was done on purpose. And I think for sure they're doing this on purpose because once things get too heavy, it's a little hard for kids to stay into it when it's not so fun and exciting, you know?
Yeah.